All right. If I remember correctly, we left off at photorealism, and this was an example of that. This is a pencil drawing, I believe. This is zoomed in on this one. It was a zoom in of this one, excuse me. And we ended here with like how a realist artist would draw or paint an apple. So just so you guys can see where we're at, we have pointillism, cubism, and Fauvism left, I think. Yep. So just a couple more to go. Well, this should be the last one. All right. So pointillism is exactly what it sounds like. So this is a Sunday afternoon on the Isle of Le Grand Jatte. Sorry, my kid is playing. And you can tell that it's a series of points or dots that create this image. Okay, so it's a technique of painting in which small, distinct dots of pure color are applied in patterns to form an image. It relies on the ability of your eye to blend the color spots together. So like you get a different effect if you step back, right? And then if you look really closely, you can see the individual dots and it doesn't look as much of a holistic image as it does when you step back. And here you can see the technique of like blending colors. So like the red and blues here, if you step back, the more purple they look because they blur together. Here are a couple examples of some pointillism. I have to pause it because my kid is crying. I'll be right back. It won't affect you, but it affects my train of thought. So if I have to repeat myself when I come back, this is why. All right. Sorry about that. You might be wondering, Miss Fletcher, why don't you just pause it and restart the video? And that's because I'm not doing that because I'm too lazy and I'd be having to do that all the freaking time and I just ain't enough time in the day. So pardon the interruptions that occur from here on out, but this is what happens when my recording video time is during Finn's awake time and not during his nap time. So as you can see, if we zoom in here, even on this really like low resolution, you can see the individual dots. And it's different than Impressionism because it's not full strokes of the brush. And it's individual color together, right? So like there are orange dots and then lighter orange dots and then yellow and pink and blue to create the shadows and the lighting. And wow, I did not mean to do that. Okay, so that's the difference between Impressionism and Pointillism. In Pointillism, you're literally using individual points of color. Okay. A lot of times, nature is a really good subject matter for Pointillism. And I'm lingering here on purpose. I just kind of want you guys to look at it. And I'll move this around so you can actually see all the colors. So you can see here that the shadows are created by darker hues, obviously. And there are varying hues of green with some yellow and orange, and some other interesting colors here like confetti colors in the trees. And if you zoom out more, you can kind of, it looks more connected than it does when you zoom in close. Okay. And here's another example of that. The further back you go, the more holistic the piece is, and then the more fragmented it gets when you get closer. Okay, this is pointillism, but it's mixed media. So these are wine corks, and some of them are, stained with wine, and then others are not, right? And it creates this depth. And then again, here's pointillism, how we paint an apple using the technique of pointillism. And this particular ism is less of a movement of art and more a technique. Okay, so it doesn't really have any other defining characteristics apart from its technique and style. Hey, ignore my crying son. He's fine. He just refuses to crawl, so he whines when he can't get where he wants to go. Anyway, Cubism. This is early 20th century. Okay, so we're getting into the modern era here. And basically, Cubism's goal is to create an image of a particular subject from all possible perspectives and angles. So all viewpoints. So instead of just looking at, for example, like this baby bottle from just one perspective, like me looking at it as the light hits it and then having some shadow over here because the light is coming from here and blah, 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 blah. Cubism would want to look at what this bottle would look like from every possible vantage point and then try to convey that dimensional perspective onto a two-dimensional piece of canvas. Right? So here's one. The Young Ladies of Avignon. Picasso is the name that you're going to see a lot with Cubism. He's kind of like the father of Cubism. And this is kind of, in hindsight, considered to be the first truly Cubist painting. And it is a little unnerving to look at, but what we ideally see is what would happen if we looked at these women from all possible angles at the same time. And we get basically rudimentary shapes and varying colors that are not super realistic because of the way, for example, that lighting might be hitting this woman's face from a different perspective, right? Than perhaps if the light was shining right on them. Okay. So, it's especially a painting movement. Sorry, I forgot to mention that one thing there. But you can also see Cubist traits or characteristics in African style Egyptian hieroglyphics, right? Because we're getting one-dimensional view, but for example, the hieroglyphic here, the engraving is trying to capture multiple angles at once. Okay. You can see the similarities here between like this African style, I think it's bronze sculpture, and this image by Picasso. And then obviously geometry, measurement of angles and shapes. Here are a couple of Picasso's paintings. So first we're going to look at Girl with Mandolin. There's the mandolin and I guess, I don't know if they're called frets for mandolins too, but there we go. And then there's her head and her hair. I hear you, bud. Sorry. And then here's the bread and fruit dish on a table. Okay. And if you notice, like, you can kind of envision that there are multiple perspectives here, multiple viewpoints. Like we're looking at what the bread and fruit would look like from multiple dimensions. Sorry, not dimensions. Perspectives put into one single dimension, right? So one plane, if that makes sense. We have curtains back here, and they're all sort of tangled. Like this is not how they would lay from our single viewpoint, but this is how Picasso is conveying them, as if he could see them from all different angles and views. The other thing I wanted to point out too is the lighting. Apparently light is shining here, but it's also shining here and not shining here, right? There's light here, but not here, right? So it doesn't make sense, like from a realistic standpoint. But at some point, at some vantage point, that's where the light is and that's where the shadowing is. Okay, and here is probably, I don't know, it might be his most famous. It's the one that I recognize when I think of Picasso. I think of this particular image, and then his blue guitarist one. But this is the Weeping Woman. And these are the things we notice. overlapping images, simultaneous views, which is what we've been talking about. We're looking at her from all different views at the same time, simultaneously. Faceting surfaces, so sides are faces rather than surfaces with dimensions. So lots of two-dimensional faceted shapes. It's distorted and exaggerated, right? Like, I don't even know where to begin with this particular one, but the anguish of this weeping woman is very clear from the angularity of the shapes that are juxtaposed with her hair, the angularity of what I'm assuming is a tissue, maybe, I don't know. There's just a lot going on. I could stare at this forever and notice something new. And there's a geometric emphasis. So obviously that's geometric shapes, okay? So everything's boiled down to their most basic shapes. And then we take like complex shapes, like the face of a woman crying, and we break it down into its most basic geometric shape. So this is part of the abstraction process, if you guys remember from the art appreciation PowerPoint. This is one of the ways that we move from realistic to abstract, is we boil things down, boil complex shapes down to their geometric basis. Here's a couple more. And anytime that I have pictures of these paintings up, I encourage you to pause the video and take a closer look at them, maybe jot down their names. This one's interesting. It's a bottle and fishes. So let me know, pause it and see if you can find where the bottle is and where the fish are. And these are, nudes descending down a staircase by Duchamp. And then here's another Picasso, Guernica. This one is depicting a war, okay? And I absolutely want you to pause here and take a closer look at what we have going on. And jot down some of the emotions that you notice. If you need to pull up the PowerPoint and zoom in on these things, please do. In fact, I'd recommend it. I really want you to take an opportunity to see where the cubist elements in here intentionally convey what Picasso might be trying to convey here. And again, this is a war painting. It's a mural. And some more cubist art. More still life here and here. And I think this is still life too, but to be quite honest with you, I'm not really sure what it is. It looks like maybe fruit. See some pears and a banana maybe in a bowl. And then here's cubist art for an apple. How might they paint an apple? Well, this is how. Okay, so I mentioned at the beginning that this was the beginnings of cubism and abstract. Okay. This apple right here, I mean. Similar to surrealism, except that this is more about perspective of an actual object rather than the elements of our subconscious or like dreams or fantasy. And then Fauvism. This is where we meet Van Gogh. And you'll see similarities between this and Impressionism. Not going to attempt to pronounce the French, but this is by Matisse. Both of these, well, actually, all three of these are by Matisse, and he's one of the most famous Fauvists. Okay. Characterized by loose, visible brush strokes, much like Impressionism, but strong, vibrant colors that are often unnatural and overtly expressive. Colors are chosen on purpose because of maybe the way the light hits a particular subject or the way that it plays with the natural colors. Okay? You guys know, like in some portraits, your skin looks more green because of the lighting, or maybe it looks more yellow because of the type of lighting. Fauvism captures that. It was initially inspired by Van Gogh, but these are some of the other artists, and I can't pronounce their name right, but Gauguin, I don't know, Georges Seurat, and Paul Cézanne. The Fauves, which means wild beasts, okay, which characterizes their art. French, of course, and then Henri Matisse was the king, or the father of this movement. And the last few slides are just more pictures. He's a post-impressionist, Van Gogh. I'm rushing through this because I'm running out of time. So pause it here and make sure that you read this. And that is it.